Hi, I'm Elon Bartelt. This is Crash Class. Crash Course was taken. And we're going to be talking about the most important events in the 9 periods of the AP US History curriculum.
Mr. Bartelt, how could we possibly fit that many events into a single video when it took 4 years to make a second season of Attack on Titan?
Anyways, for each period, our hardworking researchers have gone in and picked all the events that show us the progression of the US and what made it the world's most dominant power. Libertage! Oh, what? US is number 4? Beaten by Canada? I knew we should have taken those darn snowmen. America's the best. So, the history of the United States really kicks off with the imperialism of Europe and the arrival of the Spanish explorer Christopher Columbus in the Americas. Now, this event in and of itself is fairly simple. A large group of Europeans were led by a sleazy explorer across the Atlantic Ocean. However, they had a very large impact on both Europe and North America, as this opened up a gateway for the exchange of many goods such as corn, tomatoes, pineapples, and potatoes to Europe from the Americas, and cattle, horses, carrots, and mangoes, etc. to the Americas from Europe. This exchange also brought negative things, such as disease and guns, that eventually led to the decimation of an estimated 90% of the Native Americans' population. Now, this exchange of goods is called the Columbian Exchange. This initial contact was the first encounter between Native Americans and Europeans, for better or for worse. So, the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War, was huge. 9 whole years to be exact. This war lasted from 1754 to 1763, and it came out as a brutal conflict between England and the French. The natives were also there, but you don't really need to know that. The land that the colonies gained from this conflict brought on an initial wave of trust between the colonies and England. This is all good until you consider the 133 million English pounds of debt this put England into. This, in turn, forced the motherland to tax the colonies. Tariffs were raised, and multiple taxes, such as the stamp and sugar taxes, were placed onto the colonists. But this, in and of itself, did not upset the colonists. It was the lack of representation across the ocean that did. This prevented colonists from having any influence in what laws and taxes got passed into them, which prompted the phrase, "no taxation without representation," coined by Reverend Jonathan Mayhew during a sermon in Boston in 1750. After the constant buildup of distaste between the two continents, the Declaration of Independence, adopted by the Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776, officially severed all ties with England. By declaring themselves an independent nation, the colonists could officially ally with France and obtain assistance from them against England. Americans, as the colonists were now called, went to war with a barely trained ragtag militia, fighting for the liberties outlined in their new declaration, while England went to war as the richest nation in the world, with the largest navy and trained soldiers fighting for decent pay. Despite the stacked odds, they got wrecked. America came out on top just from sheer passion to not follow the rules and a little help from the French. So, speaking of the French, once upon a time, the French actually won something. Now, I understand if you don't believe me, but Napoleon
Bonaparte
actually brought the French to military prominence in Europe. Unsurprisingly, it didn't last long, and the French desperately needed money to continue their conquest of Europe. This was accomplished by selling the Louisiana Territory, which was 2.14 million km? What is that? Kilometers? This is America, whatever that is in yards, to the United States for approximately $11,250,000 US. That's crazy. I mean, this purchase was the first step to the new American dream,
manifest destiny, or the belief that the expansion of the U.S. throughout the American continent was justified and necessary. This idea then led to questions about the expansion of slavery into the newly acquired territory. This ended in debate between Northern abolitionists and Southern plantation owners, which resulted in the Missouri Compromise.
Oh, it's time for the mystery document. So the rules are simple. If I'm wrong about the author of the mystery document, I have to stick this fork into an outlet and get shocked. If I'm right, I'll be shocked if I don't get a passing grade on the exam. So here it is.
I'm aware that many object to the severity of my language, but is there not cause for severity? I will be as harsh as truth and as uncompromising as justice. On this subject, I do not wish to think or speak or write with moderation. No, no. I tell a man whose house is on fire to give a moderate alarm. Tell him to moderately rescue his wife from the hand of the ravisher. Tell the mother to gradually extricate her babe from the fire into which it has fallen. But urge me not to use moderation in a cause like the present. I am in earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not retreat a single inch. I will be heard.
Alright. I'm gonna have to say Harriet Tubman?
No.
What?
And why not? One more try.
Martin Luther King.
Closer. No, just kidding. He's so far away.
Alright, fine.
Do it.
You thought... I'm not actually gonna do that.
What?
I just stupid. Garrett! Okay, so apparently it was William Lloyd Garrison in his abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator.
Ha!
Shut up, Garrett.
Never could have gotten that.
I mean, you're probably right.
Yeah, that's right. Crushed your dreams. You saw it.
So, in 1845, the United States annexed Texas, making it the 28th state. This was both good and bad. The good was that earlier, the 1836 revolution made Texas an independent republic ruled by Americans who wanted it to be part of the states. The bad was that Mexico still recognized Texas as part of its own territory and didn't agree with the U.S. annexing it. The U.S. troops pretty quickly defeated Mexican troops and stormed into the capital, giving us the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Texas entered the Union as a slave state, further splitting the country over slavery. One such fellow who was deeply upset with slavery was John Brown, a Northerner abolitionist. He and 22 others raided an arms depot in Harpers Ferry, Virginia, in hopes to initiate an armed slave revolt. Although he failed and was executed, his actions showed the tensions that were present between the North and South and convinced many colonists that war was coming. These poor relations result in what is now known as the American Civil War, in which 11 of 23 states seceded from the U.S., starting with South Carolina on December 10th, 1860. All the states wouldn't be able to rejoin the Union fully until finally Georgia would be the last in 1870. The Civil War left the South in ruins due to the new strategy of total war that revolved around not only destroying your enemies, but also their infrastructure. The process of rebuilding was left to two presidents to create policies that would help rebuild the nation and bring it back to its previous state. Reconstruction was carried initially by Lincoln, who would slowly allow Southerners back into the Union, which would have been completed much the same as this Rubik's Cube, had it not been for how dead he was. But fear not. Our hero, Andrew Johnson, would take his place. Johnson would then soon be impeached, mainly because he didn't do anything. Reconstruction reached its final form, Congressional Reconstruction, where Congress would pass the 14th Amendment, which gave citizens rights as long as they were born in the United States. A mix between the poor conditions of the South and the not yet eradicated racism deterred many African Americans from living in the South and pushed them north for jobs and new lives. This was called the Great Migration. Meanwhile, in Europe, a mix of tensions and secret alliances built up towards the Great War, also known as World War I. This large-scale conflict between the Entente and Central Powers pushed the U.S. to industrialize and mass-produce war. New technologies such as tanks, planes, machine guns, submarines, and mustard gas. This war left Europe in ruins, with many cities leveled. This war also left Germany in a tough spot, having to pay $33 billion in reparations and losing many of their lands. This fueled the rise of Hitler, and in 1933, he would be appointed the Chancellor of Germany. Hitler would then start taking over neighboring countries, and Europe would fight back. For some reason, Japan would then decide to torpedo Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, finally bringing the United States into World War II. The race for nuclear arms is initiated, and on August 6, 1945, we win, bombing Hiroshima, and 3 days later, Nagasaki, ending World War II. Going into period 8, the US found itself having to deal with a serious problem. K-pop. No, that's later. Communism. I always get those confused. This new style of government was sweeping over Europe, originating with Russia or the Soviet Union. This ring of countries or states around the Soviet Union was called the Iron Curtain. The communist states became the USSR, while the democratic countries became NATO. America did what it does best and intervened before this new disease could spread across Europe. We decided that containment, suggested by the anonymous Mr. X in the X article, was the way to go. Containment was the idea that instead of fighting the commies, we could just keep them from spreading any further. The US supported anyone who was anti-communist and did all they could to help them. These anti-communists didn't have to be democratic or be good in any sense. As long as they weren't communists, the US was cool with them. This ideology would then spur the Korean, Vietnam, and Cold War. The space race ends up bankrupting the Soviet Union, causing many satellite states to leave the USSR and become independent nations. This brought the fall of the Berlin Wall, which had stood for 28 years, ideologically separating East Berlin from West Berlin, and now symbolized the fall of the Iron Curtain. This in turn brought the revolutions of 1989, where communist rulers all throughout Europe, Asia, and the Middle East were overthrown by people who, by this time, had realized that communism was pretty darn not good. This political instability gave rise to many extremist groups in these newly freed countries, mostly centered in the Middle East. Now, one of the largest events in recent history occurs on September 11, 2001, where two hijacked passenger airliners crash into the World Trade Center. A third crashes into the Pentagon, and a fourth crashes into the fields of Pennsylvania. This event was a major turning point in America's history, ushering in the War on Terror and the invasion in Iraq.
Well, looks like that does it all. All 9 periods, and we covered it in just
12 minutes and 49 seconds.
Well, time for credits, I guess. Wait. Hello? Yeah. Okay, yeah, groceries. Wait, you need me to sum up all the periods, too? Okay, bye. I love you too. Anyways, to sum up all the periods, war was a major factor in just about everything, from changing the economic goals of the US to changing foreign and domestic policy, and even our culture. The US feels it's necessary to use force to show other countries how to be as awesome as us. Manifest Destiny pushed us to the edge of our continent with no one stopping our advance. Anyways, thanks for watching, and we won't see you next week. Crash Class is produced and directed by Garrett and myself. Our script supervisor is Garrett, the associate producer is Milan, and the show is written by 2 high school students who tried paying attention to class, Garrett and myself. And our graphics team is Google Images. If you have questions about today's video, please ask them in the comments. They'll be answered by a link to a Wikipedia page. Thanks for watching Crash Class. And as they say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome. This is making me feel more hysterical than I already am. Hey, who knew that was possible? And this would have been completed much the same as this Rubik's Cube, had it not been for how dead he was. A mix between the poor conditions of the South and the not yet eradicated racism. This political instability gave rise to many extremist groups in these newly freed countries, mostly centered in the Middle East. Now, one of the largest... Darn it! Ushering in the War of Terror and the invasion in Iraq.
It's the war on terror, not the war of terror.
Crash Class is produced and directed by Garrett and myself. Our script roots... Crash Class is directed and produced.
They'll be answered by a link to a Wikipedia page. They'll be answered by a link to a Wikipedia page. Please ask them in the comments. They'll be answered by a link to a Wikipedia page. Alright, no, we can't do that. I didn't clap. If you have questions about today's video, please ask them in the comments. They'll be answered by a link to a Wikipedia page. Thanks for asking.
Milan.